I think Ed is a terrific actor, and the idea of two guys arguing about what really happened on 9/11 was very attractive to me. And Brian Connors, who wrote and directed this piece, came to me and I said, "Get Ed Asner, get Ed Asner. He's perfect." And so we did it in one day. It was, you remember that, Ed? Or
I certainly do. It was the most traumatic day of my life.
It was very difficult for you, huh? Mm-hmm. Well, I got to appreciate the fact that you gave me a chance.
Oh, well, which brings me to the fact that, I love to witness this fact that these older actors come along. Directors, actors. And because they use
to Mark Rydell.
You're not referring to me as older.
I won't get specific.
Okay, good.
You're 6 months older than me. What are you talking about?
How could that? Take a look at me. Do I look like 6?
I haven't had the operations you've had. But I know as they get into their declining years, they start to. Those directors.
Oh, I see.
They start to realize the mistakes they made of, having employed one brilliant actor only a couple of times in their lives.
Oh, I'm sorry.
For TV, never looking to him for the films, the glory that would have put him across the map in everybody's mind.
He's mad at me that I never got hired for a movie.
So now they begin to have remorse, and they look around them and say, "Get him."
Yes.
And in some slight way, they think they'll repay me for the remissness of the past.
I apologize. Many times I apologize to you for not giving you all the great roles that you deserve.
Yeah. So we got together, I feeling loathing for him, of course. And he feeling
loathing. How do you like that? The guy say
it's
loathing.
not a sort of a scant emotion that passes.
Loathing. The man said loathing.
I got a lot of loathing, believe me.
You did?
I'm amply girthed. Do you know that?
I do notice that, yes.
And in that girth, I'm able to store a lot of loathing.
And you have. Look at this. See how he spits out at me? It's frightening. The man is angry.
Harrison with you. You are listening to Go Harrison. Also watching a live video stream on GoHarrison.com, where you can see actor Ed Asner and actor Mark Rydell, both in their early 80s, both at the top of their game, continuing after 40, 50, 60 years in this business, showing all of us that maturity can also mean a full and thriving life force, and that these guys stand up for good, that they fight for you and me and the other residents of Earth, the 7 billion of us, whom they're obviously never going to meet, but most of us, or many of us certainly, probably about half, have met them one way or the other, whether it was watching television or watching movies or read about them. So they're a very powerful force and presence, and particularly when we get inside of their heads, look at their philosophy, understand what they've learned about life, because their exquisite job and their peculiar talent is they can actually see beyond where you and I are usually comfortable looking.
I was reading a review yesterday of Death of a Salesman.
Yeah.
They just opened a production in New York. Mike Nichols directed it. Mm-hmm. And I kept thinking the mistake they make is not hiring you for that. That's a great part for you.
Oh, yeah. I
really should play that.
I did a collage, what do you call it? A bunch of great scenes from American plays. And Death of a Salesman was one of them. I did it with Marty Sheen, who had just done it with George C. Scott on stage. And I told Marty that I didn't want to do it. And he said, why? Oh, no. So then Arthur Miller shows up. The first thing out of Marty's mouth is, he doesn't want to do it. And I felt so, you son of a bitch. And I thought, well, okay. No, I said, I just don't want to go home with that Surus every night. And Miller understood, and he said that when they were doing it the first time, Lee J. Cobb tried to get out after 4 months. They brought in their psychiatrist. He brought in his psychiatrist. They thought he just wanted to go to Hollywood and make more movies. But they actually were able to make the claim that it was just beating him down.
And it was, because I went to see it. With my father, I was a young student at the neighborhood playhouse, in the first year of the neighborhood play. I was studying acting. And my father called me and said, do you want to go see Death of a Salesman? He had been playing handball with Lee Cobb in a gym, and Lee Cobb said, I'll get you tickets. So we went to the theater. I said, of course, I'm excited. I was a young acting student, sitting in the first row of the orchestra. The stage literally was over our knees, the apron of the stage. And I was that close to Lee Cobb and Cameron Mitchell and Arthur Kennedy and all these great actors playing this great play, at the end of which, by the way, the curtain came down, silence. The audience didn't even applaud. They were so overwhelmed. And finally there was one clap and then another, and it became an uproar, and everybody stood up, except my father, who could not get out of his chair. He was so overwhelmed by this theatrical experience, as we all were.
Yeah.
It's to this day, it remains the most memorable theater experience I've ever had. Was it? Did you ever see it, Ed?
I saw Thomas Mitchell in Chicago. And the day after I saw him, he had a heart attack.
Well, you give people heart attacks.
Further substantiation of what Miller was attesting to. And he said, every Willie they got after that, Albert Decker, Thomas Gomez, this one, that one, they could never really do it much more than 4 months.
So I would think when you actually play a role like that, as you point out, it's so intense, it becomes you. Here you are, Ed, doing traveling around doing FDR. So you have to become FDR to a certain degree, which I would think would endear you even further to that. My 99-year-old grandmother, a year ago, I asked her, well, when Social Security came out, the New Deal, what did you think? Because the popular wisdom that we see on CNN and the regular networks and the large newspapers is that this is bad stuff, it's broken, it's horrible, everyone hates it, everyone always has hated it, and we need to get rid of it. She said, we thought it was magic. We could not believe that the government would actually do something like this for us with our own money. And I think you playing FDR like this, you get to remind us, and for many, this is the first access they've ever had to FDR.
Yeah. He's brilliant in it, by the way. I hate to say it in front of him, but I went to see it, and Brian Connors and I, who spent a lot of time together, as he's a very good writer and director, and wrote the piece that we did. We saw it and just were very, very impressed with you, Ed. I hate to admit it. I really don't want to admit it.
It'll pass.
Okay, thank God.
Well,
thank God.
But the thing, I am inordinately proud. In a way, you're speaking predominantly to the chorus when you're doing this piece. But there are always occasional mavericks, even Republicans, who come and see it. And they're reminded, I'm thinking of Camelot. There once was a land in Camelot. And it was utopia. And in that play, I think that audience reminded that there once was the beginnings of a utopia, which the Republicans have done nothing but try to rip down since.
Why is that, by the way? It seems so obvious that what
there's a Yiddish term. It's called Verbissen.
Verbissen.
Yeah.
Meaning mean-spirited.
They're biting their tails to catch the flea.
See, I know that because I grew up with Jewish people. My mother and my father, for example.
I know. Did they know they had you?
No, they never realized.
I've never been to the Catskills, but it felt like that's what it would have been like. I remember Henny Youngman, where my parents lived in Florida, a place called Marco Island. He was at the hotel somewhere. And I couldn't believe this guy pulling out his fiddle and doing these little lines.
One-liners.
Right?
One-liners, yeah.
One-liners. And you know what? They're all true. They're all true about real life. And I think that's really what you guys bring to the party here, is you don't mimic other people mimicking somebody's imaginary scenarios, but it's the stuff that you guys do is actually like a school course and entertaining. Therefore, it's edible for people like me.
Oh, I'm so glad you liked it. We had a good time doing it. The only problem was with that, Ed is not as good an actor as I am, and That's where it fell down.
Thank God, when I do film, that it just so enormously wraps around me and boosts me beyond a live performance that Mark was engaged in.
Harrison with you. You are listening to Go Harrison. You're also watching Go Harrison. We're live streaming. We're also on the Progressive Radio Network. And we're talking to two great actors, Ed Asner and Mark Rydell. I don't say great because they are great. I say great because they're great. And I think that's half the fun, is knowing you guys, limited as I do. I've met Ed several times. We suffered through a 9/11 event where people asked, like, so what was the exact composition, Ed, of the thermite used in Building 7? This is also part of the reality. When you're out trying to be part of the solution rather than perpetuate the problem, people also assume you're a chemist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
And that's hard, too, isn't it?
It's very hard. And, well, it's a wonderful exercise in humanity to believe in the corruption of 9/11. And Brian has done a wonderful job in approaching this subject and tickling the palate just enough that if people have any sense and intelligence, they'll go find out more wherever they can. But to approach people and assault them or even pose to them all of the ifs of 9/11, and no matter how schooled they are or unschooled, the schooled are even worse, to listen to me and they nod their heads, yes,
like I'm doing.
Yes.
They think I get crazy.
And then when they finish, they look up to the heavens, they look to the east, they look to the west, they look down, and they betray two emotions. One is, get me away from him, or two, I don't want to continue talking with him because I might be implicated with him. Those who want to get away, I merely signify the destruction of the Santa Claus myth, that this crime could take place in our country.
Harrison with you. You are listening to Go Harrison. You can also see live video streaming on GoHarrison.com, GoHarrison.com, where you will see actor Ed Asner and actor Mark Rydell. Both of these guys having so famously been involved in old Hollywood all the way up to the present. In their early 80s, these guys are still at the top of their game, fully involved, talking about stories and messages often forbidden, sort of inside the actor's studio is the larger image here, really talking about art, culture, and politics and how they all intersect as we continue talking with actors Ed Asner and Mark Rydell.
Lock it in. Coming up, more Harrison. 888-874-4888. On the Progressive Radio Network.
Action!
Hi, this is Danny DeVito, and you're listening to Harrison.
Ladies and gentlemen, Rush Limbaugh.
They say that I'm sleaze and elitist. You please, everybody disagrees with my rap. It's rap. I'm horrendous. I'm appalling. My ratings now are falling because I'm so full of bull, so full of crap. With condescending tribes making money selling lies. You might say everybody hates my guts. Hates his guts. I'm offensive. I'm a bigot. I'm a fraud. Can you dig it? I'm a sexist, racist, homophobic, fat, pathetic tuts. I'm a Nazi. He's a Nazi. That's right. I really am, because I'm a Nazi. He's a Nazi. That's right. You're being scammed. I'm a Nazi. He's a Nazi. I don't care about the middle class, because I'm a fat conservative butthead with the face of a horse's ass.
He's a fat conservative butthead.
Hey.
With the face of a horse's ass.
I'm a Nazi.
He's a Nazi.
I don't care about the middle class because I'm a fear-mongering scumbag with the face of a horse's ass. He's a fat conservative buckhead hates Republican sleazeball. Fear-mongering scumbag. Egotistical assbite. Mean-spirited, hog-wallering fat conservative tuts. With the face of a horse's ass. Mega dildos, Rush!
This is Harrison.
Harris with you. You are listening to Go Harrison as we stream live video at the same time on GoHarrison.com through our various different networks. We are so glad to have you aboard and so glad to share with you today actors Ed Asner and Mark Rydell. Both of these guys have seen their fair share of Oscars, have been around all of old Hollywood, and have known absolutely everybody. And we're talking about their movie Good Men and more. Let's now take a look at a scene from the Brian Connors award-winning film Good Men, which stars Ed Asner and Mark Rydell, two older guys talking about sort of the meaning of life and the stuff that's affecting you and me real time, right today, in a way where they can get away with it because it's like we're peeping Toms overseeing an intimate conversation.
Put stars in and directs a comedy about the Holocaust.
Who said it's a comedy?
It wasn't funny to me, I'll tell you that.
You never saw it! Oh, I see. Yeah. Now I'm inviting you to one of Hitler's parties.
I suppose you think it's okay to build a mosque on ground zero.
It's not a mosque. It's an Islamic cultural center.
Hey, 9/11 was not a soundbite.
That's right. But who was the attacker? Who attacked us?
Who's being targeted? Blacks, gays, and Jews. Do you remember what it's like to be a Jew?
I'm proud to be a Jew. I'll always be a Jew, but I'm not...
Here comes the but.
I'm not going to live in the past.
Actors Ed Asner and Mark Rydell, both of these guys have seen their fair share of Oscars, have been around all of old Hollywood, and have known absolutely everybody. And we're talking about their movie Good Men and more. Talking about what it means to be an actor, having been in the game for so many years and seeing life on life's terms and watching this country transform, metamorphose, transmogrify into the thing that it has become today, which for so many of us, we just can't figure it out anymore. And having them kind of evaluate it as we once again sort of examine that crossroads of pop culture and politics. Art, filmmaking, storytelling. You know, you guys are the Mark Twains. You are the Jonathan Swifts. You know, if it weren't for Gulliver's Travels, we wouldn't have been able to talk about The Crown that
You
way.
ever read Modest Proposal?
Modest Proposal, right?
Correct.
I mean, all this stuff. Jeffy Chaucer, The Miller's Tale, but that was more about eating vaginas in the hayloft. But there's
What's
so
the
much
matter with
good
that?
writing. And what's wrong with
That
that?
hay gets in the way, for Christ's sake.
What's your favorite movie you've ever directed, Mark?
Geez, you know, it's hard. It's you ask somebody something like that, and what the
I
truth
know
is...
nobody's ever
it's
asked
like-
it of you, so I wanted to be the
The
first.
problem is that you're like asking me which of my children do I favor. And, I've never made a movie that I didn't love and that I didn't care about and that wasn't really essential for me to make it. It's the only way to get a movie made these days. You have to have a kind of passion that's irresistible. It's very hard to do. It's hard to make movies of moment and of seriousness because of special effects and explosions and space, which seem to be the heart of the movie industry at present. There are exceptions, and I try to be one of the exceptions. It's just very difficult these days, I find, to get a movie of real substance made. Studios don't want them. They want the kids. They want the young audience, the 13, 14, 15, 16-year-olds.
Live from Marilyn Monroe's former apartment in West Hollywood, this is Harrison on the Progressive Radio Network.
Harris with you, talking to actors Ed Asner and Mark Rydell. We're talking about their latest film. It's called Good Men. And in it, they both play two guys in their 80s. They happen to be two guys in their 80s in real life, talking about the very issues that many of us feel we have been forbidden to talk about. Certainly in public, corporate, mainstream media, it's been forbidden subject matter. Such topics as, could 9/11 have been an inside job after all? These sort of discussion points. And what's fun is when you have two elderly guys talking quietly with each other, we get to be kind of peeping toms and absorb the information rather than have somebody lecture at us or call it a conspiracy or this kind of things. This is one of my favorite shows ever that I get to visit with you guys and talk about what you see. It's inside the actor studio on steroids.
You know, I was in a plane coming back from Paris, and the stewardess, you see, on a screen, they show you the plane or an image of the plane, and suddenly the plane turned around and began to go in the opposite direction. So I said to the stewardess, what's going on here? The plane has turned around. She says, we're going back to Paris. And we were very close to landing in New York. I said, going back to Paris? Why are we going back to Paris? She said, I'm not allowed to talk about it. There's been an incident in New York. And so the whole plane, of course, the whispers went on in the plane. We didn't find out anything until we landed in Paris again.
You had enough gas to go back?
Yeah, sure they did. And we flew all the way back to Paris, 5 hours, another 5, because we were about ready to land in New York. And when I was told that all the airports were closed immediately, and we had to fly back to Paris, and we found out, of course, in Paris what had happened, or at least we knew that the incident occurred. We didn't find out how it happened, but it gave us another week's vacation in Paris. But it was a horror, one of the great horrors of life, to discover that those people all died. It's beyond comprehension. To this day, I have difficulty dealing with it.
My sister was driving into the World Trade Center that day.
Oh,
Normally
my
took
God.
the subway right underneath, but for whatever reason was driving in that day. And as she was crossing the bridge and getting right up to the base, all this started happening, and she was able to turn the car around and get out. But she, along with 9 million other people, had a personal experience with that. I was watching it on television here in Los Angeles, and it was, is it real? Is it not? Is it a movie? Could
it seemed
this
like a movie,
possibly
didn't it?
happen here in the U.S. like this? Not one plane, then another, then another. And then we're faced with all these bizarre things like a huge jetliner crashes into a field in Pennsylvania, totally evaporates. Not even a metal flake, not a tooth, not a black box, not even a molecule, not even smoldering earth. So miracles happen simultaneously, hence it's reasonable to ask questions at that point.
But the questions have never been answered, have they?
That's right.
We are still in the same stupefying ignorance that we had ever since that date, and it's I don't know how do you solve this? How do we finally find out what happened? How do we find out that Building 7, which was 100, 200 yards away, that went down as well? Nobody's asking these questions. Why is that, Ed?
I merely signify the destruction of the Santa Claus myth, that this crime could take place in our country.
You're a liberal and you are. Well, you are, and you're
That should really qualify me, shouldn't it?
Well, you're an activist too. You're a political activist.
Well, people regard themselves as midgets. Their thinking is a midget thinking. Forgive me, midgets. And I just meant in capacity.
Yes.
And their fear is gigantic. They either don't want to know, as I said, because it would destroy their myth of America that such creatures could exist in positions of power, who might have assisted in the destruction of those buildings, or they don't want to be implicated in case they listen too strongly and attentively, and they don't want the FBI knocking on their door.
Well, it's disturbing. It's disturbing to even think that that we've been lied to.
Wow.
It's disturbing.
It's not the first time we've been lied to.
No, but in that,
But this is the most
depth,
enormous.
Yes, exactly, and it's overwhelming. It's disturbing to think that we've been duped, that we don't know the truth.
And do the people act on it? No.
Well, what do you do? What would you recommend?
Well, they would commune with each other and try to say, why aren't you aroused? Why aren't you aroused? Why don't we get together? Why don't we do this?
Because we want to bury it. We want to bury it. It's not acceptable.
It's not interrupting their economic train.
Well, maybe that's so, too.
It's funny how gas prices interrupt everyone's economic train, but Afghanistan and Iraq and the trillions spent don't interrupt anybody's economic train. But add a nickel to a gallon of gasoline, and my God, I'm going to sell. I just paid off my Ford F-150, 48 grand. I'm going to sell the thing at a loss. I'm going to go spend another 40 on a Prius.
What does that say about us? That's the question.
Yeah.
But does it say that we are ignorant? Does it say we don't want the truth? Does it say it's unacceptable truths are better left unsaid? What do you do about this? How do you confront the real issues of this thing which happened 11 years ago? How do you confront it? It's unacceptable somehow to face the possibility that we could have been lied to.
Well, and
at the founding of our country, Thomas Jefferson said that the tree of liberty must be occasionally fertilized by the blood of patriots. And I guess people just aren't into bloodletting these days.
unless it's somebody else's blood.
Yeah, unless it's across the water.
Yes.
GoHarrison.com.
Harrison with you, your new best friend. You are listening to Go Harrison and watching live video streaming on GoHarrison.com, GoHarrison.com, where you will see with your own eyes actors Ed Asner and Mark Rydell, both of whom bask in a bucket of Oscars on so many levels. Ed is now doing a one-man traveling show called FDR, where he's explaining and portraying, much as Hal Holbrook does with Mark Twain, who this guy was and how he changed the world. Ed recently was in the Oscar award-winning Disney Pixar film Up. He's still playing on HBO over and over again in the HBO movie Too Big to Fail, where Ed plays Warren Buffett. We all remember him as Lou Grant. He is a ubiquitous player and everything, as is Mark Rydell, who I just met for the first time today, but I grew up watching all of his movies on Golden Pond, The Rose, all these other very, very famous movies, and he has acted and directed with absolutely everybody, from John Wayne to, Katharine Hepburn. All of them. These guys have seen and do see still everybody in the Hollywood world, and we're sort of talking about the meaning of life as seen through these wonderful, wise, and sagacious guys. So
look, we marched 1 million strong against Iraq.
Yeah.
Does anybody remember it? Does it mean a goddamn thing? Physical presence is fine, but until you get 51% of the people saying no, doesn't mean shit.
You know, it's interesting, Ed, you say that, because we find that in advertising, 15% of the population, if 15%, only 15%, stops using something, corporations will dump it completely in policy
Rush
changes.
Limbaugh found out.
Yeah, he sure did, right? Yeah, he
Thank
sure
God
did.
for that.
I mean, here's a guy on 700 stations. Clear Channel is freaked out. Premier Broadcasting, his syndicator.
Well, he's lost all his sponsors,
All
correct?
his national sponsors.
National sponsors.
Right. And likewise, high fructose corn syrup, which is ubiquitous in everything. It's brutally bad for the human body. But about 14 to 15% of people decided they'd heard enough about it, they didn't want it anymore. It's been pulled out of a lot of products. So the 51% in a general sense is really, really true. But only 15% of us actually caused the sea change to change the policy.
So that's a hopeful point of view.
It's
that
really
you're
hopeful.
making.
It's really hopeful.
You're saying in essence that we shouldn't quit saying the things that we need to say in order to tell the truth.
Yeah, because Limbaugh, talk radio has, at its heyday, it had only 18% of radio listeners, period. You would have thought it was everywhere because of the way it talks about itself. That was at its heyday 10 years ago. Now it's probably 14%, 12%. But Limbaugh is a household name. Yet most people really don't listen to him. And just a handful of people were able to scream out. And then remember, Twitter, because Rush Limbaugh has said shit for years that is much worse than this. But there was no Twitter. You didn't have 14-year-old girls tweeting thousands of people, Facebook and all the rest of it. That's what's killed him. So really, a small collective of people online wiped this guy out.
Well, that's hopeful.
Yeah, it is hopeful.
It is hopeful because he needed to be wiped out. The fact we cheered when he lost his sponsors. He's a monster, and I guess many people feel that he's a monster. It's just that maybe now they have the courage to speak up.
Well, now how do we get that 15%?
Right.
How to go about getting it 15%?
I think we do giveaways.
Okay.
You know,
I'll give away Ed.
Seriously, you know, join the movement and you'll be in a drawing for a free trip to Switzerland. I can arrange that. I'm actually working on that. Seriously. Okay. After watching The Bachelor on ABC, which this nobody guy is pretending to be rich, 9 hours of this, and this helicopter lunches with baskets, we'll give away a trip, and all they have to do is sign here and send the right stuff, but the 15% will show up. And, I mean, it's a game show nation. It's a theme park of a country right now. We have, Newt and Callista, is that her name?
Callista.
Yeah.
Colostomy.
Right, exactly.
Callista.
We have all these characters. Rick Santorum, who, has probably cut off his own penis so that he didn't have to look at it, yet obsesses 24 hours a day about gay men. Like most straight guys do.
But how can he reach the prominence that he's reached, where he is literally thought of as a possibility as the Republican candidate?
I got a figure just the other day. I believe something like, it's a huge figure. I'm going to say 81%, but it cannot be. So, but it is an enormous figure. It's well over 50%. Of the people in Mississippi believe that Barack Obama is a Muslim.
I know, it's astonishing. No matter how much the truth comes out, they refuse to accept it.
And if you go to Tampa, Florida, which is where the big Republican convention is going to be in August, the interstates meet at a certain point. I-4, which goes to Disney World, and 20 minutes outside of Disney World between Tampa and Orlando is the Ku Klux Klan capital of the state of Florida. So where the junction of all these freeways go is the most enormous Confederate flag you have ever witnessed in your life. And you guys know from driving past a car dealership, these flags that look like they're a mile long, you can hear them snapping in the wind miles away. Florida's flat. You can see this thing miles away. And at the very base, where all the freeways meet, is a little tiny plot of land, which is where the flagpole is, and there's a shrine to the Confederate soldiers who fought for Florida in the Civil War, although Florida was not in the Civil War, but tried to tell them that. And this thing went up the day after Obama got into the White House. So for all the touristos, the millions of them that go to Disney, that come to these conventions, that go to Super Bowl in Tampa, they all see this message over and over again because it's the new normal. And I think that's what you're saying, Mark Rydell, is how do these guys get away with it? Here you have Anderson Cooper keeping them honest. I'm trying to get a list of who he's kept honest. Even if there's just one person on it, I'm still waiting. But these guys are not doing their job and saying, let's take a look at Mr. Ringling's big top. Let's break down the circus tent, the lion, the silk hat, and look at what's really going on. And what does America look like 3 years after Rick Santorum? Do we start fitting women for burqas? These are reasonable questions to ask, I think.
Unfortunately, they are reasonable. Well, are you disappointed? You don't think that the things can get better?
No, I don't. I never do.
Well, you've never sourpuss.
I've seen your work.
How do you like that? A man has the gall to say such a thing. So disrespectful.
Yeah, I know. I've got to get my pubic hairs tweaked.
What do they do? How do
they separate them. And
all two of them.
As we ripen, like a good grape gets turns into a better wine.
Oh, yeah.
You know, there is a whole world out there that's available, and a lot of people, because of our advertising, because of our mass messages, think that about the age of 30, you're supposed to buy a walker. And it's so not true. You get to take everything you've ever learned in your whole life with you into the next experience.
Aren't we living proof?
Yeah.
Living proof of the fact that age helps.
Yeah.
Certainly he is.
I needed all that time to get good. That's the God's truth.
Well, I want to thank you guys for having come in today. This has been a super treat. I know that's what people say during shows.
No, but it's true. It was a pleasure.
It really is. It's been a treat, you know?
He's not so sure. Look at us. Look at him shaking his hands.
It's okay. It's okay.
No, I have to go to the John. I'm trying to work off the energy.
You can sit on the very commode that Marilyn sat on.
Oh, baby.
I want to kiss it.
Kiss the commode. Let's all watch that.
Harrison with you. You are listening to Go Harrison. You're also watching us live, a live video stream at GoHarrison.com, where you can see actor Mark Rydell, who also has directed well over 20 movies, Oscar award-winning projects like On Golden Pond and The Rose, The Cowboys with John Wayne. Next to him, Ed Asner, who many of us grew up with, knowing as Lou Grant, most recently in an Oscar award-winning Disney Pixar film called Up. Ed is reprising a role on Hawaii Five-0 from 40 years ago. These guys are so fully involved in the game, like Betty White, who, by the way, Ed Asner will be acting with on Nickelodeon, if I'm not, or TV Land, rather, coming up in the next number of weeks. And they're talking very candidly and very transparently about what all this stuff means and what the future might be looking like for all the rest of us.
The idea of love and friendship becomes predominant.
Over the political issues, yes.
All of the shit that goes on in the world, that nothing is more important than love between people.
That's the essence of the film. That's really finally what the film delivers, that the relationship between us is stronger than our antipathy or our difficult positions that we take politically. That finally it's our relationship is strong enough to overcome all of that.
I think that's the selling point of the film, the fact that it didn't go blazing across with red banners at the end about 9/11. That people are given a thought and then we turn away from it.
Yeah, I find that 9/11 served as an hors d'oeuvre rather than the entree, allows people to eat it. It's much like a chicken. Chicken is very good, full of protein, full of nutrition, but you have to eat a chicken in small bites. If you eat the chicken in one gulp, you choke and cannot absorb the nutrients. And 9/11, for whatever reason, has to be broken down into petit fours or, cakeettes.
Right.
And, M&Ms, one by one. And also we deal with the Flat Earth Society as well, but we also have to do basic structural science for people, remind people that man and dinosaur did not walk hand and claw, as Mrs. Palin would remind us. So we're up against a lot, and frankly, I am really burnt out half the time because during the last 8 years of the Bush administration, when so many of us were out there vitally attempting to fight the good fight, and now it's kind of over, and the corporations and Citizens United, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, and now people want to show up? And, keeping that light lit, because there is major hope and possibility so long as we don't get fried. And you guys have, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the current wars that we're still engaged in, you've stayed through all of this and kept your spark. What's the secret to that, if there is one?
No, there's not. The first secret I'd like to tell you is that what you just said makes it clear why you have this show. You are articulate and insightful, and it was very impressive.
Thanks. And I pick good guests.
Yes, right. You have the wisdom to pick good guests. Certainly, one good guest and one half good guest.
We had the curse of not being drafted into World War II, which was unfortunately the last great war. And probably the worst thing about it was it made people think war was good. we must do everything we can to show that even that war should not have taken place. After being denied the glory of World War II, we've been given shoddy alternatives. Korea, Vietnam, everything else, Panama, Iraq, Afghanistan. And we have to learn from that they can't sell us that inferior product anymore. If you want to have war, let's go for the big one. Let's drop the bomb. Let's say we are truly engaged in the battle between the forces of light and dark.
Eloquent, huh? Isn't that amazing? Who could expect that from
eloquent.
him? Yes, very good.
And, I wonder also about if you can't lick 'em, join 'em. I mean, this is why Colbert is such a treat to watch.
Isn't he fabulous?
It's like, you're right, we should do that. Now, let's add icing and frosting and extra sugar and more candles to it, and let's see what the end game looks like. And invariably, the perpetrators, whoever these people might be, are like, what's wrong with that? I mean, really, what's wrong with that?
This is Harrison on the Progressive Radio Network.
Now you guys are going to be in the very cell phones and the iPads and all those electronic instruments that you were talking about. This is where you live. So my job is to put you there instead of porn.
Well, don't overlook porn. I mean, let's not eliminate it. It's worthwhile occasionally.
I would say that was one of the signal things lacking in Mark's films.
And we'll look forward to checking in with you down the road. This has been a fun little actors studio.
Did he say
proxy.
check? Did he say check? You think there's any money involved? Go ahead.
A couple of bob?
Yeah, right.
It's an electronic check if you accept those, of course. Sent to an iPad.
Listen, it was a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, you too, guys. Thank you so much.
He said it.
I know that. But you didn't fight it. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Bravo. Thank you. Yes.
Beautiful job.
GoHarrison.com.
I think Ed is a terrific actor, and the idea of two guys arguing about what really happened on 9/11 was very attractive to me. And Brian Connors, who wrote and directed this piece, came to me, and I said, "Get Ed Asner. Get Ed Asner. He's perfect." And so we did it in one day. It was, you remember that, Ed? Or
I certainly do. It was the most traumatic day of my life.
It was very difficult for you, huh? Well, I got to appreciate the fact that you gave me a chance.
Oh, well, which brings me to the fact that, I love to witness this fact that these older actors come along. Directors, actors. And because they use
to Mark Rydell.
You're not referring to me as older.
I won't get specific.
Okay, good.
You're 6 months older than me. What are you talking about?
How could that? Take a look at me. Do I look like 6?
I haven't had the operations you've had. But I know as they get into their declining years, they start to. Those directors.
Oh, I see.
They start to realize the mistakes they made of, having employed one brilliant actor only a couple of times in their lives.
Oh, I'm sorry.
For TV, never looking to him for the films, the glory that would have put him across the map in everybody's mind.
He's mad at me that I never got hired for a movie.
So now they begin to have remorse, and they look around them and say, get him.
Yes.
And in some slight way, they think they'll repay me for the remissness of the past.
I apologize. Many times I apologize to you for not giving you all the great roles that you deserve.
Yeah. I
really should play that.
I did a collage, what do you call it? Bunch of great scenes from American plays. And Death of a Salesman was one of them. I did it with Marty Sheen, who had just done it with George C. Scott on stage. And I told Marty that I didn't want to do it. And he said, well, why? Oh, no. So then Arthur Miller shows up. The first thing out of Marty's mouth is, he doesn't want to do it. And I felt so, you son of a bitch. And I thought, well, okay. No, I said, I just don't want to go home with that Saurus every night. And Miller understood, and he said that when they were doing it the first time, Lee J. Cobb tried to get out after 4 months. They brought in their psychiatrist. He brought in his psychiatrist.
The full and thriving life force, and that these guys stand up for good, that they fight for you and me and the other residents of Earth, the 7 billion of us, whom they're obviously never going to meet, but most of us, or many of us certainly, probably about half, have met them one way or the other, whether it was watching television or watching movies or read about them. So they're a very powerful force and presence, and particularly when we get to get inside of their heads, look at their philosophy, understand what they've learned about life, because their exquisite job and their peculiar talent is they can actually see beyond where you and I are usually comfortable looking.
I was reading a review yesterday of Death of a Salesman.
Yeah.
They just opened a production in New York. And Mike Nichols directed it. Mm-hmm. And I kept thinking the mistake they make is not hiring you for that. That's a great part for you.
Oh, yeah. So we got together, I feeling loathing for him, of course. And he feeling
loathing. How do you like that? The guy say
it's
loathing.
not a sort of a scant emotion that passes.
Loathing. The man said loathing.
I got a lot of loathing, believe me.
You did?
I'm amply girthed. Do you know that?
I do notice that, yes.
And in that girth, I'm able to store a lot of loathing.
And you have. Look at this. See how he spits out at me? It's frightening. The man is angry.
Harrison with you. You are listening to Go Harrison. Also watching a live video stream on QvesvesA.com, where you can see actor Ed Asner and actor Mark Rydell, both in their early 80s, both at the top of their game, continuing after 40, 50, 60 years in this business, showing all of us that maturity can also mean a